Won't be a moment.
That's okay.
I'll just let you know. Right.
Okay, right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, which is one that's a part of our education series. It is being recorded and it will be available to view on YouTube later on, and you can find the link on the Ground Source Heat Pump Association website later today, hopefully, should be today. There's a question and answer session at the end, and if you do have any questions, if you go to the bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A button down there. So if you can put any questions into there, and then we will be happy to answer them at the end. Lucy Cotton and Madeline Constance of Women in Geothermal, or WINGS, are presenting today, and we've decided to call it Winging It. And they will be discussing, amongst other things, gaps within our education system, which showed to me that Tony Blair's call back in 1997 of education hasn't really quite materialised in our world, maybe as we would have wanted. And Lucy and Madeline and I all agree that education within our industry and the energy transition is crucial if we want to inspire the next generation, as well as dispel some myths. And I'm just going to start by just explaining a little myth I had in my office yesterday, where we drill holes, boreholes. And we had a call yesterday where we were asked, if we keep drilling holes into the earth, it's going to affect the planet's magnetism, and we are going to explode the moon. Now, that was a genuine question yesterday, and that's one of the myths that we need to sort of dispel, really, and start using education to explain to people exactly what does happen. We believe that there's a very limited career guidance too, so the girls are going to talk to you about that, and I'm quite looking forward to this webinar this afternoon. Just before I hand over, to avoid any confusion, Lucy and Madeline will describe ground source very often as shallow geothermal. So it's ground source, geothermal, shallow or deep. So here we go. So I'll hand over now to Madeline and Lucy. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Thanks for the introduction. And it's interesting what you say about myths, because we also come across quite a lot of myths, and it reminded me of one that we came across a lot working at United Downs, which was, if you drill to 5 kilometers, aren't you going to cause a volcano? So these myths are something that we need to bust. And it's not just education of school children, it's actually education of the public that is equally important. But anyway, I'm digressing. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having us speak here. It's a pleasure to speak to you. My name is Lucy Cotton, and I'll be talking today with Madeline Constance. We're from Geoscience Limited in Falmouth, and we're also representing Women in Geothermal, the UK chapter as well. So we're going to follow on from what Andrea talked about last week with gaps in the education system for ground source heat pumps, but we're coming at it from a deep geothermal perspective. And a lot of the gaps are the same, and a lot of the challenges that we are facing are the same to help drive this low carbon revolution, as it were. So, as I said, we are from Geoscience Limited, the Deep Geothermal Department in Cornwall. But as well as Deep Geothermal, Geoscience also have a ground source heat pump department, which Robin Curtis and Tom Pine, who are members of the GSHP, work in and head up. We first found out how crucial education is to this low carbon heat industry when we were working on the United Downs Deep Geothermal Power Project, which we were project managers of and the sort of technical staff up until May 2020. And part of that work was to design an education and outreach program to disseminate largely what we were doing with the project, but it was much wider than that, and it gained traction on its own. I'll talk about the United Downs project in depth a bit later on, and some of the education systems that we put in place. We'll also talk about women in geothermal and some of the initiatives that our committee are putting in place to help tackle the education gap problem in geothermal. So an overview of this presentation, we'll be looking at education for the energy transition, filling in those gaps, the associated challenges that come with having gaps in the education system and things that aren't covered in terms of moving into this low carbon economy, and the proposed action, both that we've taken at Geoscience, what overlaps with what Andrea was talking about last week, and what we are hoping to do with WING and where that can tie up with GSHPA, and also what we see as the next steps. So I'll pass on to Maddie, and she'll talk to you about the education for the energy transition.
Hi everyone, so just to give a bit of context to start with, so why is education so important for this energy transition? Well, as we know, heat accounts for half of our energy demand here in the UK, and therefore decarbonisation of this heat is critical to meeting pressing climate targets. Geothermal energy decarbonise our heat in the UK. However, the UK isn't typically considered to be a geothermal country, although geothermal resources do exist in unconventional settings, such as the radiogenic granites in Cornwall, targeted by the United Downs project, the first of its kind in the UK. Therefore, geothermal development and associated deep drilling is unfamiliar to the UK, and so establishing this new industry is going to require education from the grassroots of communities. Educating and inspiring this next generation on renewable energies and the role of renewables within the energy transition is absolutely critical to the acceptance of these new technologies and the development of this industry. However, as we've previously discussed, and as Andrea mentioned last week in her webinar, these low carbon technologies, such as ground source heat pumps and geothermal, aren't being taught as part of the curriculum in the UK. And so students are therefore not being educated on these technologies that are currently being employed across the UK as part of this major transition. And as Andrea said last week, teaching these technologies is currently not law, and therefore teachers aren't able to teach it. So through our experience working in the UK geothermal energy industry and our role in Women in Geothermal, we've identified a number of gaps or areas for significant improvement in the education of low carbon heat technologies, specifically geothermal, in relation to this energy transition. So by the time students come to select subjects in year 10, Key Stage 4, they've had a very brief introduction to natural resources and energy, but they haven't yet been introduced to geothermal energy, and particularly in the relation to this energy transition. Students are therefore not being educated on these key concepts related to the energy transition prior to making their first informed decision about further study. And for students that have selected geography at GCSE, this briefly covers natural resources and energy, but geothermal still isn't represented. And therefore, at the time of choosing A-levels, where students are narrowing down these areas of study even further, they haven't been exposed to geothermal energy and in the context of sustainability and this energy transition. And so they may not have been inspired to then choose a related subject to study at A-level. So throughout this whole education system, from the early years through to university, students aren't being exposed to geothermal energy and the different aspects of the industry, career opportunities within the industry, and therefore they're not considering geothermal as a potential career path. Even at university level, until very recently, geothermal hasn't been an option to study, and the links to the geothermal industry haven't been in place. So these are just a few of the main areas that we feel need to be targeted for improvement. And now I'm going to discuss some of the associated challenges with these gaps in the system. So to start with, one of the main challenges of the lack of education of new technologies is unfamiliarity. Unfamiliarity with geothermal energy in the UK and associated deep drilling can cause concern amongst the public. Lack of exposure to geothermal energy in these early years of the education system can lead to misconceptions and negative perceptions in years to come. Understanding and acceptance of these new technologies like geothermal is absolutely critical to gaining a social license to operate, as we've seen through our experience working at United Downs, and therefore it's key to the success of these types of projects. Since geothermal isn't currently represented within the curriculum, this next generation will lack the knowledge and expertise in low carbon heat technology, which is critical for this energy transition. And without the education of geothermal energy from the early years, students are unaware of career opportunities within this green sustainable industry and the role it has to play in the energy transition. The scale of the energy transition and the advancement of these emerging technologies such as geothermal in the UK will require a large workforce skilled and knowledgeable in this field. Until recently, there's not been the option in place to study geothermal at university, as I've said, and therefore there's been a lack of support and guidance available to students at university level looking to pursue a career in low carbon heat technologies like geothermal. This is beginning to change with the introduction of subsurface energy courses at university level that are incorporating geothermal energy. And sort of increasing exposure to industry and links between academia and this geothermal industry at this level is so important for students in the transition from university level to industry. We are beginning to see this in areas of geothermal development in the UK, but this absolutely needs to be present at all universities. So since students are not being introduced to geothermal energy from an early age, and the current lack of exposure to geothermal at university level, they aren't being given the opportunity to explore the different aspects of the industry, career prospects, and gain practical experience prior to applying for graduate roles. So now Lucy's going to talk about a few of the proposed actions through WING.
Yeah, thank you, Maddie. You're picking up from what Maddie was saying. It's the gap that we're trying to fill with WING is university based to start with. So both Maddie and myself are on the committee of Women in Geothermal. I'm ambassador for the UK and Maddie is the convener. And within WING, we aim to promote the education, professional development and advancement of women in the geothermal community. It's a small group of us, of women and men. I must say at this point in time, we are trying to get a 50-50 balance. I know it's women in geothermal, but we would like men on our team as well. So we're a small but ambitious group of women and men that are trying to set out many initiatives, and a lot of these are aimed at the education gap. So here are a few of our initiatives that we have for 2021. And like I said, they are aimed at the higher age group of graduates and students that are wanting to pursue a career in geothermal. And one really good outcome would be to get students some practical experience. I remember talking to Andrea last week after her presentation. This is something that we both feel very strongly about and is an ambition of the GSHPA, but also us, to get students to have practical experience so they know what to expect in the working world. The first thing is a mentorship program, which is Maddie's baby. She's setting that up, so I'm going to leave her to explain that. We have a new role within the committee, which is a student ambassador role, who is concentrating on linking industry with academia and creating a platform for students that have an interest in geothermal to talk to each other, because it's a countrywide interest. So it'd be good to have a platform where they can talk to each other. We'd like to create some career support and some guidance within this student ambassadorship role. So it's quite a big role. Over the last year or so, we've really increased the number of universities that we are in contact with. And that also is due to them increasing the amount of courses that are available that provide geothermal in their study scope. So we would like to connect with these departments and engage with students more who are interested in geothermal. Part of the way that we've done this is in June, we held a careers panel just after lockdown to try and give students some hope that, you know, there is a career after this. And it's very difficult in lockdown. It's hard in any case to see a clear career path in something like geothermal, especially in the UK, where it's just getting really started. But in lockdown it's even harder. So we held a careers panel, which I'll talk about more in detail because it was very successful. And also during lockdown, we started something called Wednesdays with WING, which started out as a think and drink, just to try and create a community within our WING members in the UK and get those conversations going. But they were really popular. So we've changed it from Think and Drink to Wednesdays with Wing, where we run skill sessions for students. So Maddie did a how to present like a pro skill session last time. And we have presenters from all over the country, different lecturers and that sort of thing. And it also gives PhD students and master students a chance to present their work if they're working on geothermal energy. And another initiative that we would like to get started is called A Day in the Life of. So it would be really good to do a feature, like a weekly feature on social media of a woman in the industry and just give her background. So it gives students something to look up to and see what is going on, something they can engage with. To give you a bit more information about the careers panel, we received so much interest. It was great. We had 150, well, we had over 150 registrants, but unfortunately, we were getting used to Zoom and the platform that we used could only take 150. So there's a lesson that we learned. We need to have be able to capture a wide audience. And we tried to represent different areas of the industry within the panel. So it was myself talking about deep geothermal, Lucy Crane talking about lithium from geothermal waters, Chris Rochelle, Dr. Chris Rochelle from the BGS, who's a geochemist and is involved in some really interesting work with supercritical heated fluids. Professor Ian Stewart, who works on the social side of things, or social science side of geothermal, and Joe Ireland, who works in shallow geothermal in Northern Ireland and is doing his PhD at Queen's University and is also doing things with heat storage. So we had universities from all over the UK join, and I don't know if you can see the graph, it's quite small, but it was really nice to see the spread of people who joined the careers panel session, because it shows that interest is everywhere. It's no longer just one or two universities heading it up. It's a real widespread. And each of the panelists were given questions before the session so they could prepare their answers. And on registration, the students were allowed to submit 3 questions. And it just created a really nice discussion for about an hour and a half between the panelists and provided some insight into career opportunities and various aspects of the industry. Because it's not just, you don't just have to be a geologist to go into it. There are so many roles. Just for the United Downs project, for example, we had graphic designers, project managers, geologists, engineers. I mean, it's not, there's a wide scope of skill sets that are needed to develop this industry. And following the success of last year's event, we're planning to hold another one in June. So Maddie, would you like to talk about the Wednesday with a Wing sessions?
So as Lucy said, the Wednesdays of Wing initiative was launched at the end of last year following our successful Think and Drink webinar series, which was developed during the lockdown last year to keep the geothermal community engaged and connected. So the Wednesdays with Wing webinars are held monthly, and they've included both geothermal presentations from representatives of the geothermal community in the UK, and skills sessions providing students the opportunity to develop valuable skills applicable to industry, sort of preparing them for taking that role in industry. And I mean, these presentations have included, students as well. So it gives, like Lucy said, it's given students the opportunity to present their work, for example, master's students. And these skills sessions, the first one was held last month, and I gave a talk about sort of top tips in presenting, particularly during this virtual time. And we'll be continuing these.
Okay.
So another initiative we're currently working on is the Mentorship Program. So I'm particularly passionate about supporting higher education students with an interest in geothermal. And so within Wing, my focus has mainly been on initiatives that aim to support university students interested in geothermal in that transition from university to industry. So when I consider my final year at university, I was a student with a keen passion for geothermal energy, working to secure a graduate role in the industry. but I didn't have the option to study geothermal energy at this level. And what would have been extremely helpful for my own professional development and in applying for graduate roles is if I'd had exposure and insight into the geothermal industry through connections with industry representatives, such as an industry mentor. So geothermal development is increasing across the UK, and the industry is really beginning to grow. And with this, there's a growing interest in geothermal energy among university students, particularly with the recent pivot we're seeing from oil and gas into geothermal. Students initially looking to pursue a career in oil and gas and now recognising these skills are transferable, and instead are looking to pursue a career in a green, sustainable industry. This has been clear through our oversubscribed careers panel event and presentations we've given at departments across the UK, science departments, and the conversations with students following these talks. With subsurface energy courses incorporating geothermal now beginning to be introduced at universities in the UK, it's even more important that we stay connected with these departments and provide that link between academia and with the UK geothermal industry and its community. So to support this, I propose that we as Wing coordinate a mentorship program which would pair geothermal industry professionals in the UK with final year university students interested in geothermal. The pairings would be decided based on the specific interest of the student and the specific area of work of the mentor. So we're looking to cover sort of the various aspects of the industry and from shallow to deep through the selected mentors. So having industry representatives from both ground source heat pumps and from shallow geothermal through to deep geothermal, and in all the different aspects, geochemistry, geophysics, hydrogeology, everything. And we plan to host a Meet the Mentors networking session prior to opening applications for mentees, just to give prospective mentees the opportunity to meet the mentors, ask any questions, and identify which mentor would be most suited to them. So they'll be able to express this in their expression of interest application, and that also helps us to assign best pairs. So I'm now in the process of designing the full programme for this and developing initial ideas. And as a team, we're working to create the supporting documents for this programme. And since this is our first mentorship programme, we plan to run it as a trial. So it will be a period of 6 months and around 5 to 10 pairs. We'll set a loose framework for the programme, including the initial meeting start date and end date, and various advice drop-ins, check-ins, feedback and networking sessions throughout the 6 months. So the idea would be that mentor and mentees have regular meetings that include goal setting, action items, and lots of opportunities for feedback. We see this opportunity as an opportunity for students to explore and gain insight into the geothermal industry and the specific area they're interested in and the area of the mentor. The mentor sessions would provide students with an actual practical experience that they can record on their CV, and this helps them prepare for that graduate role and strengthens their applications. The partnership would also provide students opportunity to develop employability skills, including communication, written and analytical skills through various tasks set within the partnership. The mentor could also support the student in overseeing and advising on CV, professional development and job applications. So now I'll hand you back over to Lucy, who's going to talk about our work in the United Downs Deep Geothermal project.
Cool, thank you very much, Maddie. So again, there's an emphasis on that practical experience, which I'll re-emphasize in a minute with something that we did with United Downs. So the education program at United Downs was extensive. It was designed by myself and Susie, my colleague, and it kind of ran away with itself. So it was from ages 7 to 21. The idea being that, like I said, we don't want just one-off projects. We want to build an industry, and to do that, we must do it from the grassroots, because you need people that are interested in it, but you need the public to know what it is and really back it. It needs to be a household name, just as wind and solar are. You've got a different challenge with geothermal, that it's not a tangible heat, it's not a tangible electricity source. If you can see the sun, you can feel the wind, but with geothermal, particularly in the UK, you can't see or feel it. It's not like we've got geysers everywhere. So it's a difficult one to communicate, and it's important that the youngsters get a hold of this as early as they can. So the map here shows all the different schools that we visited during our education program. And we did a mixture of visiting schools and having schools on site when the rig showed up, but we did do a lot of the outreach on foot and going to schools, which was really, I think, really helped us in achieving our goals of talking to as many people as possible, because it was a session that could be delivered for free. The schools didn't have to pay for it, and it really gathered pace quickly. And we could fit it in with whatever topics that they were being taught at the time. So for Key Stage 2, we often fit it in with energy or rocks and that sort of thing. So I'll run through some detail of the programs that we ran now. Okay, so for Key Stage 2 and 3, the education program was based around this little character, Miss Molecule. Miss Molecule was a character that we came up to help explain how geothermal works, the resource that you can't see. And she's a water molecule. She goes around the reservoir and collects heat in her buckets, and she takes the heat up the production well, pours it into the heat exchanger, drives a turbine to create electricity. And she's a Cornish water molecule, so she has a surfboard on her back, and she takes the surfboard off, surfs down the injection well, and then jumps through the fault zone, getting more heat into her bucket, and the process starts again. So you've got that idea of a continued cycle and a renewable system. And from this molecule, we were able to create an animation, an obstacle course. So we would go to schools and set up tunnels for the production well and hula hoops for the reservoir. And it was really good fun. And it was a practical thing that the kids could do and really visualize it. We had a comic. Susie designed a comic and worksheets. We had a little cuddly toy that came with us, with a basket full of little pom-poms. So Miss Molecule really provided a good base for us to do our outreach on and lesson plans. We also did whole school assemblies with Key Stage 2 students, and that was particularly good at the schools that were really local to the site, because some of them could see the rig from their classroom, so that worked well. Key Stage 3 is quite a hard age group to reach when you're going out to them, but the council were running STEM days around that time, and it was all based on energy. So it was luck of the draw. And Susie and I attended both STEM ambassadors, and we attended a lot of STEM days, which were for year 7 and 8. This is a picture of me with on a STEM day in Peneth. We also did year group assemblies. So when they were covering a particular topic, maybe in geography, we would be asked to go in and do an assembly. So it's a way of just having quite a wide reach quite easily in 10-15 minutes in the morning. It doesn't take too much time. It's okay for companies to do that, really, to give 10-15 minutes of your time to a school to do a bit of outreach, and it sticks. Even if it sticks with a handful of pupils, it's something. And when the rig was on site, we had a lot of site visits from schools as well. So I'm going to play you, I hope this works, I'm going to play you a bit of Miss Molecule's mission, which is the animation. So I'll play you Miss Molecule going and doing her job, and then how that sort of related to the end of the animation as well.
Hello, I'm Miss Molecule. I am a H2O water molecule. My special job is to help the geothermal energy get to the surface so it can be used to create electricity. Let me show you the work I do every day. Firstly, my buckets are full of heat, so I need to go up the production well and empty them into the heat exchanger. Are you ready? Here, back at the surface, I deliver the heat to the heat exchanger, which turns a working fluid into steam. This steam turns the turbines, which make electricity. Follow me so I can show you where I get the heat from. As I go down through the fault, I collect the heat the granite has produced, and the deeper I go towards the reservoir, the more heat there is. Here we are back at the underground reservoir where I started, filling up my buckets with more heat, ready to take to the surface once more. I can do this forever, I never get tired, and the heat will always be replaced by the granite. I will say goodbye at this point as I have lots to do, but have a safe trip back to the surface.
Here, back at the surface, we can follow the heat to see how it's made into electricity and is delivered to our homes. And remember, the next time you walk down the street at night, turn on your light, switch on the TV, or plug in your favourite thing at home, take a moment to think about where the electricity is coming from. It could be coming from geothermal energy right under your feet. Hopefully one day we'll all be using renewable energy for our electricity to ensure the Earth remains a clean and beautiful place.
If anyone is interested in seeing the full animation, it's on YouTube or our website, and you can access that. And we did three animations in the end. One for Key Stage 2, one for sort of GCSE level, and one to explain seismicity. And we were lucky enough to have Professor Ian Stewart narrate it and work with us through that programme. For Key Stage 4, sort of GCSE and up, we devised a Raspberry Shake programme. So one of the things that could have been a problem for United Downs was the chance of causing microseismicity. And so that is something we wanted to communicate right from the start. And to do that, we needed to be as open as possible. So we devised a Raspberry Shake microseismic schools monitoring program, where we installed these seismometers. They're basically a Raspberry Pi computer with a geophone in them in the 9 local secondary schools, and made a Raspberry Shake network that is ongoing now. And this enabled the teachers to use the data they got from not just their Raspberry Shake, but the whole network in their science lessons. So they're looking at real data for science projects, which gives the children a view of why you study the subjects you do, because sometimes it's so hard for them to see where their studies are going. Like, why do I need to study maths? Why do I need to study this or that? But this is a way of showing them real live data that they're using in their lessons and we're using as a project. So that was really successful, and it's still ongoing now. There's a teacher in particular at Truro School that's really taken it up and run with it, and he uses it in his physics lessons all the time. And to launch the Raspberry Shake event, Ian and I went to schools and did a launch event and a presentation, and he said how it related to sort of the big scale hazard wow stuff. And then I honed in and said, yeah, but the microseismic monitors are really useful to detecting really, really small earthquakes that we need for our data to see where the fluid goes in the reservoir. So it normalized earthquakes, and they haven't had much of an issue with induced seismicity and complaints from the public. So it does work if you talk about it and educate people. We also had a lot of site visits, subject-specific site visits for GCSE geography and geology and science, and we did a lot of careers events, as well as year group assemblies, like I said. And for this age group, it was really important to do a lot of outreach for girls into geoscience, because for some reason, there's not as much of an uptake in the sciences at A level or in the geosciences at A level in uni from girls as there is boys. And it's always perplexed me, because it's not a manly subject, but for some reason there's not as much uptake. So that was really important to do some outreach with girls into geoscience. And from one presentation of girls into geoscience, we got 3 girls for work experience in the summer, which was really, really nice. Then for the higher and further education, we did subject-specific geology and geography presentations on site, and guest lectures at unis and that sort of thing. A lot of career events. Like I said earlier, we don't just need geologists for this sort of industry, we need a whole host of skill sets. And that was really important to get across in career events. And those career events are a really good way of connecting with students and just making them aware of the sorts of opportunities there are and the different pathways in one industry. We also had a summer internship program, which was 4 weeks, and we took on 3 students, one for a geology internship, one for a drilling engineer internship, and one for a geophysical internship. And we had over 40 applicants for each position. So it was really highly competitive and amazing to see the interest. And again, it goes back to getting that practical experience, so that those internships really gave the students hands-on practical experience. And actually Maddie was our geology intern, and we couldn't let her go, so hired her straight away afterwards. I will now pass you on to her to finish off the presentation. Oh, sorry, Maddie. There you go.
I think there's a slight delay as well. Thank you, Lucy. So what are the next steps? Well, ultimately, the government needs to recognise the importance of educating students on these low carbon heat technologies from a very young age, so that they can form long-lasting opinions on green technologies, and understand the role they have to play in decarbonisation of heat, the energy transition and sustainability. Gain insight into the career options and aspects of the industries, and make informed decisions about further education and their careers. So it's great to be involved with the educational series for the Ground Source Heat Pump Association, and through continued conversations, we'll definitely be in collaboration with the Ground Source Heat Pump Association and to promote education of low carbon heat technologies such as GSHP and geothermal. It's important that we, as representatives of the geothermal and ground source communities, continue creating educational resources that can be used in schools from an early age, so that there is more exposure to these low carbon heat technologies from the very early ages of the education system. So thank you very much for listening to our presentation today.
Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing. There you go. Oh, Andrea, you're on mute.
I'm on mute. There we go. I'm now. Yes, thank you very much. Interesting. Echoes an awful lot of what I've said as well, and you know, we're in it together. And education needs support, and your next steps are absolutely right. You know, and what I've just taken from today is education, exposure, inspiration, familiarity, and careers guidance. They're the 5 I wrote down there today. Absolutely. And we've got to get that in there. And you know, the law's got to be changed to get this into the education system, and that's my big beef at the moment. I've enjoyed Miss Molecule. You're on my wavelength here, and I have to say that I have come up with 1 or 2 little characters' names. I thought we could have Ellie Electric, all wired up and zany sort of a character, and Hugo Heat Pump, who's kind of slow and steady, and Betty Borehole, she could be quite a tall, thin character. So there were just 3 I've just jotted down as I've sat here, and my educational thoughts are running away with me right now. So I'd like to say a big thank you very much to Lucy and Madeline. I don't see any questions at all in the Q&A. So I don't know if Stephen's got anything there that's come through at all. This session is on YouTube. Will be on YouTube, and there's a link via the GSHPA website. Has anybody got anything that they would like to add? If you'd like to jump in now, or any questions that you have. I think that Laura and I could probably volunteer ourselves as somebody who you could interview of the day in the life of.
Yeah, great, perfect.
Fantastic.
I was the first female member of the GSHPA Council that I'm aware of. Laura's the first female chair, and we're both directors. So we've sort of, as you said earlier, you know, sometimes it's a bit of a woman in a man's world in these things, and it's interesting to be in there, you know. So yeah,
cool. Thank you.
Okay, I've got something here from Robin, I think. Where do any of you think that you can get a wider or further exposure? We're doing our best. we're trying to push this in. I think we're all going to be involved with STEM.
Yeah,
in the
that's
schools.
that's a really good way, I think. For us, that was how we got exposure at United Downs, because they're so linked up with the council, and getting in with those local councils is a really good way of doing it. Geography Southwest, yeah, thank you, Susie. Susie's our colleague, and Geography Southwest are doing a really good initiative of providing teachers with geography resources, and I know Geoscience, we're providing some of those resources, but potentially that would be a good way for GSHPA to go as well, because we've just focused on the deep geothermal stuff, not the...
Yeah, and I think, thank you, Helen. I think that if we work together and we're all coming at it from one angle, but what I really am passionate about is until that gets into the national curriculum, where the teachers can get out that national curriculum and go, whoa, there we go. This is where we need to be. This is what we need to teach. Until that happens, we're going to really struggle.
Yeah.
And I think, once the schools get back in there, we'll be able to get a lot more involved. Interestingly, I have actually got a school here in North Wales. A friend of mine works in a school, really interested, wanting me to get in there for year 9. And I've got a meeting with her colleagues next week. So from last week, that's come along. And I think if you get into one school, then it's people talking and networking. And I think that's a really big thing for getting this sort of stuff in there. But we've got to get the law dealt with. We've got to get the national curriculum orders rewritten. That's the bottom line.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting you mentioned year 9 as well. And like you said in your webinar last week, that's the sort of time that they're looking at getting those 2 weeks of work experience. Obviously, that may vary with COVID situation, but it's a really good time to get in there and have students exposed to these industries and different career opportunities within them, so that they can go and then explore these different aspects and, figure out their interests and things and be inspired.
Absolutely. I mean, you don't know what you don't know if you don't know it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're right.
There's so many questions, I mean, about all sorts of different careers that you don't even know exist. And some of you might be able to see this calendar behind me, the little boy that's on there who's standing up. I asked him a few weeks ago, what do you want to be when you're grown up? And he said to me, I'm not really quite sure, actually, Grandma, because that job might not have been invented yet. And
smart.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then he listened to my webinar and thought it was very interesting. So there you go. We've just got to get out there, and the bigger the voice, the better. And if everybody can just, link to our webinars and all the rest of it, that would be just great.
I think you're right in something you said earlier, and that we must work together as well. There needs to be a joined up approach.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got Josh Cook on here saying he's currently a technical designer for ground source heat pump installs company, recent graduate, no idea about geothermal before I joined my company. So education is definitely needed. Absolutely, Josh. Absolutely. And Helen's saying if we're able to offer online sessions for schools, great. And I'm more than happy to do a virtual lesson. I don't care if there's 1,000 children sitting in that hall. I will go on the screen and I will do a virtual lesson for anybody that wants any sample lessons doing. Absolutely no problem.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And particularly since, incorporating this within the curriculum is going to take time. I think it's on us within the industries to create these resources and be there.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think we've got any more questions. Skype a scientist, that's their concept. Well, we're going to have a look at that. So we will definitely do that. So I think what we'll do, Tom, thanks, great presentation. Well, thank you very much, Tom. I'm glad you've enjoyed it. Thank you again to Madeline and Lucy. We will be on again next Thursday with another one of our GSHPA webinars. Which if you keep your eye on your LinkedIn and your Facebook, Stephen will be busy pinging that about this week. So thank you very much, and thanks for joining us, and we'll see you